Hi friends, I welcome you all here at TNV Academy. In this session, we are going to talk about an international standard ISO 50001 2018. Now we shall talk about the clause 7 support of ISO 50001 2018. The clause 7 support of ISO 50001 2018 is about the execution of the plans and processes that would enable an organization to successfully complete their energy management system responsibilities. This is a very powerful requirement covering all management system resource needs. Organizations will need to determine the necessary competence of personnel working under its control, affecting the performance of energy management system, its ability to fulfill its obligations, and ensure they receive the suitable training. In addition, organizations need to ensure that all people doing work under the organization's control are aware of the energy policy, how their work may impact the energy policy, and implications of not conforming to the energy management system. Clause 7 also specifies about the requirements for documented information which relate to the creation, updating, and control of specific data. Clause 7 of ISO 50001 2018 has further 5 subclauses, which are 7.1 Resources, 7.2 Competence, 7.3 Awareness, 7.4 Communication, 7.5 Documented information. Let's start with the subclause 7.1 Resources. The subclause 7.1 Resources states that the organization must determine and provide the resources needed for the establishment, implementation, maintenance, and continual improvement of energy performance and the energy management system. As per the clause 7.1, the requirements are to check that the organization has identified which resources it needs to make available in order to ensure the effective operation of the energy management system. Resources will often include raw materials, infrastructure, finance, personnel, and ICT, all of which can be either internally or externally provided. Having sufficient resources is vital to ensure service conformity and satisfy customer requirements. Example, having adequate workforces, finance, and equipment to ensure timely delivery of services. Many organizations run into energy management system non-conformities as a result of insufficient or improper use of resources. The organization should identify the internal and external resources that are needed for the achievement of the organization's objectives in the short and long term. The organization's policies and methods for resource management should be consistent with its strategy. As part of its strategic planning, top management must decide what resources it must develop, acquire, or outsource to be competitive. Due to the ever changing dynamics of the business environment, these resources and competitive advantages must be constantly upgraded or altered to enable your organization to maintain its competitive advantage relative to other firms. To ensure that resources such as equipment, infrastructural facilities, materials, knowledge, finance, and workers are used effectively and efficiently, it is necessary to have energy management system processes in place to provide, allocate, monitor, evaluate, optimize, maintain, and protect those resources. Auditors may look at the budget to check that some funding has been allocated to the energy management system, but they might dig deeper, checking if the organization has really identified all types of resources required and that it has taken action to ensure that those resources are available as needed. Coming to subclause 7.2, Competence. What does this clause state? The subclause 7.2 Competence states that the organization must determine the necessary competence of person or persons doing work under its control that affects its energy performance and energy management system. As per this subclause, organization must ensure that these persons are competent on the basis of appropriate education, training, skills, or experience. According to this subclause, organization must take actions to acquire the necessary competence and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken wherever applicable. Clause also specifies that organization must retain appropriate documented information as evidence of competence. Subclause 7.2 also says under a note that applicable actions can include, for example, the provision of training to the mentoring of or the reassignment of currently employed persons or the hiring or contracting of competent persons. Let me explain this subclause 7.2 in general. Competence describes the guidelines that must be followed by all staff members in order to be considered competent of the requirements. This procedure ensures that all employees are performing to their best ability in their particular segment of expertise. The purpose of the competence procedure is to define process of organization for undertaking the necessary actions and responsibilities for ensuring that the competencies required meeting customer and other external or internal requirements. This competence procedure also defines the responsibilities for planning, reporting, and retaining associated records. Organizations should establish a practice for evaluating existing staff competencies against changing business needs and prevailing trends. Organizations should check for evidence that all staff members who work under the organization's control are competent and that evidence continuing competence is maintained as a documented information in accordance to clause 7.5 of the standard. The organization can define the competency requirements by actively identifying training requirements and delivering the training actively. Competency requirements can be defined by actively monitoring the effectiveness of the training given to the staff members. Training should never be performed as a thoughtless reaction with no actual objectives, but instead it should be advanced toward permitting each employee with the skills and knowledge they need to move the organization forward and improve customer contentment. As per clause 7.2 requirements, organizations should train the staff to improve their skills and overall performance. Comparing existing performance to post-training performance is a simple way of evaluating the efficiency of training. Organization can consider making provision for the following questions related to audit. What type of training is given to new employees? How the training has been evaluated? What steps are taken by organization when training is considered unproductive? What types of training records are maintained by the organization? So friends, practicing all this information, organization can determine and provide the necessary competence of working persons under its control, affecting its energy management performance to achieve the organization's objectives. Let's talk about subclause 7.3, awareness of the standard. The subclause 7.3, awareness, states that persons doing work under the organization's control must be aware of the energy policy and their contribution to the effectiveness of the energy management system, including achievement of objectives and energy targets and the benefits of improved energy performance. The clause specifies that person working under the control of organization must be aware with the impact of their activities or behavior with respect to energy performance. Subclause 7.3 awareness also specifies that people working under organization's control must be aware with the implications of not conforming to the energy management system requirements. Let me explain this subclause 7.3 awareness in detail. Clause 7.3 specifies that the organization requires to make workers under its control aware of the organization's energy policy, energy management objectives, their own specific contribution, as well as prominently the consequences of not conforming to requirements. Organizations should review their communication, awareness activities, and plans to ensure all affected personnel are included and address any breaches. Subject to the size and values of the organization, a wide range of approaches can be engaged for awareness of the energy policy and objectives. From regular meetings, sessions, talks, notices, leaflets, and publication of energy metrics to the inclusion and participation of individuals in cross functional teams and improvement initiatives. Job descriptions, training records, work instructions, and minutes of performance review meetings are some examples not only of ways in which staff can be made aware of their specific contributions and implications of non-conformance, but also as documented evidence of such. Let's discuss about awareness training. Organizations do not need to conduct long theory sessions for awareness training. Training techniques can involve short training programs accompanied with tutorial videos and hands-on demonstrations that address key elements of the energy management system. Communication via circulars, electronic bulletin boards, posters, and informational meetings are other procedures to promote and strengthen the energy management awareness training. The requirements for general awareness training apply to all employees, including those whose work may cause significant impact or energy management risks. Awareness training is intended to provide an overview of the organization's energy policy, objectives and targets, and overall energy management system. The organization must establish and maintain procedures to make its employees and members at each relevant function and level aware of the importance of conformance with the policy and the energy management system procedures and requirements. It should also include the actual and the potential significant impacts and risks of the activities, products, or services. Awareness procedure should make employees aware with the benefits of improved personal performance and the employee's roles and responsibilities in achieving conformance with policies and procedures. Organization must establish and maintain procedures to make its employees aware with their roles and responsibilities towards emergency awareness and response and potential consequences of departure from specified operating procedures. Now let me discuss about the awareness training material. Organization may also include additional elements in awareness training that address the organization's objectives and targets, the employees' actions to minimize or eliminate impacts and risks and how they can contribute, the importance of compliance with operational and regulatory requirements, the overall improvement of the energy management system performance, and the potential financial return, the importance to interested parties. General awareness training should be commenced in accordance with task demands. Awareness training is not skills acquisition, but rather broad based training provided to increase employee awareness of particular energy management issues. Friends, till now it was all about the subclause 7.3 awareness of ISO 50001 2018. Now let me discuss about the subclause 7.4 communication. The subclause 7.4 communication of ISO 50001 2018 states that the organization must determine the internal and external communication relevant to the energy management system, including what it will communicate, when to communicate, with whom to communicate, how to communicate, and who communicates. This clause says that when establishing its communication processes, the organization must ensure that information being communicated is consistent with information generated within the energy management system, and it's dependable as well. According to this subclause 7.4, the organization must establish and implement a process by which any person or persons doing work under the organization's control can make comments or suggest improvements to the energy management system and to energy performance. Lastly, this subclause also specifies that the organization must consider retaining documented information of the suggested improvements. Now, let me explain this subclause 7.4 in detail using some examples. While establishing its communication process, the organization must take into account its compliance obligations and ensure that energy information communicated is stable with information generated within the energy management system and is consistent. The organization must respond to relevant communication on its energy management system. As appropriate, the organization must retain documented information as evidence of its communication. Clause 7.4 communication refers to both types of communication, that is, internal and external communication to the organization. It requires organizations to establish and maintain a process for internal communication between the various levels and functions of the organization. It also requires organizations to document and respond to relevant communication from external interested parties. One of the examples of internal communication includes communicating energy objectives to the staff. Other examples of internal communication is communicating the energy policy and raising awareness of energy management issues to the staff. Another example of internal communication could be advising of non-conformance to relevant divisional heads. Let's talk about examples of external communication. External examples include dealing with energy management system complaints or replying to media inquiries, especially in the happening of an occurrence. A failure to communicate effectively within initial few hours of an incident could seriously fall the company's ability to control the situation. This will challenge the company's reputation amongst staff, customers, media, or the general public. Effective internal communication require mechanisms for information to flow top down and bottom up. Employees are often an outstanding source of information, issues, and ideas. Communicating with external parties is also significant for effective energy management system. Information from external sources can be critical in setting energy management system and other business goals. The clause 7.4 communication requires the organization to have in place a system of communication that ensures that those within the organization are kept informed regarding the energy management system and energy management issues associated with the organization's operations, and that communication from external interested parties is received and handled according to the established process. Communication of the energy policy will also form an important part of internal communication, as a key part of the communication program will involve making sure employees understand the energy policy. In order to develop effective processes for internal and external communication, it is useful to have clear understanding of what is encompassed by the terms internal communication and external communication. and what the ultimate goal is of such processes. The key to achieving the goals of internal communication in an energy management system is to develop a two-way communication pathway: communication from top management and communication from line workers who are most familiar with energy management issues at the organization. Top management must act to support energy policies and procedures and the overall energy management system. External communication generally refers to any communication between an organization and external interested parties regarding management issues at the organization. Interested parties could include regulators, customers, suppliers, vendors, etc. It is intended to ensure that inquiries from external interested parties are addressed in a systematic manner. To successfully implement a closer working relationship between the energy management manager and the communication or public relations department will be required to ensure that a response is given that is technically correct and properly communicated. The key to creating an effective communication program is to involve as many employees as possible in the energy management system process. This will require initial and continued outreach by top management, but will often result in substantial rewards through innovative and cost saving procedures forwarded by employees. Reward and other appreciation programs can play an important role in evolving an interest for this program. Friends, it was an explanation of subclause 7.4, communication of ISO 50001 2018. Now, let's talk about subclause 7.5, documented information. Documented information is a term which is intended to describe any information that is needed to be controlled and maintained by the organization and the medium on which it is contained. In brief, it includes anything that organization requires to be recorded to make sure its energy management system functions properly and that organization can demonstrate concerns of the case. The requirements for documented information are captured and are kept impartially basic. In simple words, a document is information that is written or recorded on some medium such as a paper, sheet, or computer's storage device. A document may specify requirements, for example, inventory or technical specification of a product, and may provide direction or show results or evidence of activities performed. The term documented information is used for all document requirements under ISO 50001 2018. The need to have additional documentation beyond those specified in the standard may depend upon compliance, obligations, including regulatory requirements and own organizational requirements. Other factors to consider may include the complexity of services and processes, types of activities, energy management issues, significant energy aspects, economic risk, effectiveness, and the competence of staff. This information is expected to be personalized to organization because it is noted that the extent of the documented information can differ due to the size and complexity of the organization and also the competence of the people. The organization is responsible for determining what documented information needs to be retained, the period of time for which it is to be retained, and the media to be used for its retention. The requirement to maintain documented information may also include the possibility that the organization can retain that same documented information for a particular purpose, for example, to retain previous versions of it. Lastly, there are requirements for the control of documented information, particularly how it is available and suitable for use, how it is adequately protected, how it is distributed applicably, and how access, retrieval, use, storage, and preservation are controlled. Finally, there needs to be a control of changes, retention of documented information, and disposition when these documents are removed from use. If you look closely, you will see that these requirements are very much the same as those already in place for documented procedures and records, only merged into one set of requirements. The requirements of the clause 7.5 of ISO 50001 2018 standard are there to give organization a framework to build an energy management system that works the best for organization in effort to meet legal requirements and improve energy management performance. The subclause 7.5 has its three subclauses, which are 7.5.1 General, 7.5.2 Creating and Updating, 7.5.3 Control of Documented Information. Let me start with the requirements of subclause 7.5.1 General. The subclause 7.5.1 General states that the organization's energy management system must include documented information required by this document and documented information determined by the organization as being necessary for the effectiveness of the energy management system and to demonstrate energy performance improvement. Subclause 7.5.1 states, as a note, that the extent of documented information for an energy management system can differ from one organization to another due to the size of the organization and its type of activities, processes, products, and services. It could differ due to the complexity of processes and their interactions and the competence of persons. Let's now talk about the requirements of subclause 7.5.2, Creating and Updating. The subclause 7.5.2 of ISO 50001 2018 specifies that when creating and updating documented information, the organization must ensure appropriate identification and description. For example, a title, date, author, or reference number, etc. Clause states that the organization must ensure appropriate format and media of the documented information. Examples of format are like language, version, graphics, video, etc. And the example of media are paper or electronic. Subclause 7.5.2 also states that the organization must review and approve of documented information for suitability and adequacy. Now, coming to the subclause 7.5.3, Control of Documented Information. The subclause 7.5.3 of ISO 50001 2018 states that the documented information required by the energy management system and by this document must be controlled to ensure that it is available and suitable for use where and when it is needed. As per this subclause, the documented information required by the energy management system must be adequately protected. For example, from loss of confidentiality, improper use, and loss of integrity. Subclause 7.5.3 specifies that for the control of documented information as applicable, the organization must address the activities like distribution, access, retrieval, and use, storage and preservation, including preservation of legibility, control of changes, example version control, retention, and disposition. This subclause says that the documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the energy management system must be identified as appropriate and controlled. Lastly, Subclause 7.5.3 states as a note that access can imply a decision regarding the permission to view the documented information only, or the permission and authority to view and change the documented information. We have now completed the clause 7.5, documented information, of ISO 50001-2018. I sincerely thank you for your interest and attention. Thanks and best wishes.